copy here in case somebody needs it. Leila has one too.
Right on camera.
It's not a bad turnout.
تعرفي لأمون أمون غريب. It's also
Might need more.
Professor
I usually put bottoms.
you.
Thank you. On the dot. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks to those of you here at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and those joining us online. My name is Tamara Kharroub. I am the Deputy Executive Director and Senior Fellow at Arab Center, Washington, D.C. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, where we'll be presenting and discussing the findings of the 2025 Arab Opinion Index. The Arab Opinion Index is an annual survey conducted by the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies to gauge Arab public opinion around issues of political, cultural, and social importance to the Arab region. This has been conducted since 2011, and it's the largest of its kind in the region. This round, 2024-2025, polled more than 40,000 people in 15 Arab countries, starting in late 2024 and through 2025. Respondents in this survey were asked about a range of issues, including their political participation and assessment of their government's performance, their views on democracy and different governance models, their media and social media use, the role of religion and religiosity in their public and political life, their opinions on the Palestinian cause and normalization with Israel, their attitudes towards conflicts and threats to the region, and their perceptions of the United States and its policies in the Arab world. While Arab public opinion on these issues shapes political dynamics and US engagement and interest in the Arab world, the views of the Arab public are often neglected. This is why today we will present the findings of the Arab Opinion Survey, and we will thus discuss implications for US policy in the region, and more particularly for the Trump administration's approach to the Arab world. It is my pleasure to introduce the speakers for today. I will briefly introduce them in speaking order. Layla Omar is a researcher at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies, an adjunct professor of sociology and anthropology at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Youssef Munayyer is the head of the Palestine-Israel program and senior fellow at Arab Center, Washington, D.C. And Khalil Jahshan is the executive director of Arab Center, Washington, D.C. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Layla will be giving the presentation of the findings, followed by a discussion and commentaries on this data by my colleagues Youssef and Khalil, after which we will be taking questions from the audience. Just a reminder that you can send in your questions at any time during the discussion. For those of you watching online, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom to send your questions, or send them by email to events@arabcenterdc.org. That is events@arabcenterdc.org. To those of you in the room, please use the question cards in front of you, and when you're ready, please raise your card so it can be collected by one of our staff members. And with that, let me turn it over to Layla, who will present the findings.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Tamara, for introducing this. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Arab Center, Washington, D.C., for organizing this important event to present and discuss some of the main findings of the Arab Opinion Index. It's ninth edition, 2025. As Dr. Tamara mentioned, I'm not going to repeat what she already said, but it is a recurring public opinion survey conducted by the Arab Center across Arab societies, where such surveys can be carried out. And the idea of a regular public opinion survey actually stems from the Arab Center's core mission, which is a conviction that the Arab population does have a public opinion, right? And that this public opinion needs to be or deserves to be collected and studied systematically, continuously, particularly with regard to urgent and pressing Arab issues. So understanding citizens' positions, attitudes, and perceptions across the Arab region is essential, and the Arab Center is committed to making these findings publicly available to anyone who's interested in such data, right? Like academics, researchers, policymakers, etc. So since 2011, the center has implemented this regular survey. So like Dr. Tamara mentioned, again, this is the 9th edition of the survey to gauge public opinion on a wide range of key social, economic, and political topics. And I'll come back to these topics in a second. But I also want to say that this index is quite unique compared to other regional surveys because it does rely on local expertise. So we deal with local partners and local researchers to develop questions, to implement the surveys, which is really a characteristic of this survey. So like you can see here, the 2025 edition was conducted on a sample of over 40,000 respondents across 15 Arab countries, which really makes it the largest survey project ever implemented in the Arab region, both in terms of sample size and also thematic scope. And you can see here the index has expanded steadily since its launch in 2011. So we started with around 16,000 respondents in 2011, and now we have more than 40,000 respondents. So fieldwork was conducted between November 2024 and August 2025. More than 413,000 hours were needed to carry out the surveys by a team of 1,000 researchers, equally balanced in gender. The team covered a total distance of over 1 million kilometers. And just a quick note on sampling as well. So in each country, we used a randomized, stratified, multi-stage process which is designed to ensure that different population groups are represented fairly in proportion to their size. So the survey accounted for dimensions such as urban versus rural areas and the principal administrative divisions in each country according to the relative weight of each stratum within the population. And this ensured that every individual in each surveyed country had an equal chance of selection, with a margin of error ranging between 2 and 3% across all countries surveyed. The sample design also enabled results to be disaggregated by region, governorate, and principal administrative divisions in each country. So the results of the index are presented according to the countries surveyed and the general average of the Arab world. And for the purpose of comparison, data from the surveyed countries is classified according to the geographic regions of the Arab world. So like you can see also on the screen, we have the Arab Maghreb, the Nile Valley, the Arab Mashriq or the Levant, and the Gulf region. So I want to show you also this. This short video really shows basically how many topics we cover in the survey. Like I said, a lot of different social, economic, and political issues, including citizens' evaluations of state institutions, attitudes towards democracy, levels of political participation, role of religion and religiosity, use of social media, and many other different topics. And the survey also examines regional and geopolitical developments, including perceptions of regional and international powers and their policies in the Arab region, as well as current and unfolding issues. And in this edition, particular attention was given to the war on Gaza, the wars in Sudan and Lebanon, relations with the West and Western culture, and the role of social media as well. So we are also proud to have conducted the first public opinion survey of this scale in Syria, which was carried out following the fall of the Assad regime in December 2024. So like you can see from this video, we have so many different variables, a lot of different questions. We have more than 1,000 variables in total. Many of them were asked in all countries. Others were asked or developed specifically for specific countries, depending on the circumstances or the topics that we want to cover. But of course, I cannot present all of them today. We can't discuss all of them. So we will be focusing on specific topics. Today, I'll be focusing on findings related to living conditions for Arab citizens, assessment of state institutions and government performance, democracy and political participation, questions developed for countries undergoing transitions or facing crises and conflicts like Gaza, Sudan, Lebanon, and Syria, the Palestine cause and the war on Gaza, and public opinion towards the US. Okay. So first of all, we're looking at respondents' assessment of living conditions in general. So when we look at the general living conditions for Arab citizens, we find that 57% of respondents believe their countries are headed in the right direction, compared to 37% who say they are headed in the wrong direction. And 43% of those who said things were going in the wrong direction blamed economic causes mostly. So 14% cited unfavorable political conditions, others stated poor state management and policy, as well as a general lack for stability, but the main reasons given were mostly economic reasons. 63% of respondents rated security in their country positively, compared to 34% who rated it negatively. And as expected, a majority of Sudanese, Syrian, and Palestinian respondents indicated that security in their country was poor. Also, 48% described the economic situation of their countries as good. 49% judged the economic situation of their countries as negative overall. And if we take a closer look at how respondents assess their economic conditions, we find that 26% of respondents, mostly in the Gulf region, reported that their household income was sufficient to make savings after covering necessary expenditures. 41% reported that while their household income was sufficient to cover necessities, they were unable to save. And 28% of respondents reported that their families were experiencing poverty, with household incomes not covering necessities. And we have many different variables that we use to measure these assessments of the economic situation. So we use different variables and different indicators, and self-reported household income sufficiency is one of them. But it's also important to note that there is a significant gap between the Gulf states and other countries when it comes to the percentage of families experiencing poverty. So if we look at the priorities of Arab citizens in general, we find that the largest bloc, 60%, specifies priorities of an economic nature. More than half of the citizens listed unemployment, high prices, poor economic conditions, and poverty as the most important challenges facing their country. So now we move to assessment of state institutions and government performance. Like I said, we have so many different variables, but I'm trying to show some of the variables or some of the questions that can give us a sense into what the bigger picture is. So we look here at citizen confidence in state institutions, for example, and we find that it actually varies. So confidence is especially high in the military, public security, judicial institutions, but it was lowest in parliaments and legislative councils. We also asked several questions about whether respondents think that state applies the law equally to everyone. And we see here that 40% of respondents said that their state enforces the law equally among its citizens, while 37% think that it favors certain groups, and 18% believe that it does not apply the law equally at all. We also see that 53% of respondents believe that the foreign policy of the current government reflected their views. 51% believe that the economic policy reflected their views. So there is a division here, right? The next section focuses on Arab public opinion and democracy, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I know that Dr. Khalil will focus extensively on this section, so I'm just, again, presenting some of the main findings or findings that would be interesting to look at. So we find that the majority of Arab citizens actually have continued to support a democratic system over the years. And we see this, for example, by looking at the percentage of respondents who are able to provide a substantive definition of democracy. So 83% of the citizens in the Arab region are able to provide a substantial definition of democracy, whether it's related to a guarantee of political and civil freedoms, a guarantee of equality and justice among citizens, political participation, etc. The majority of Arab citizens also reject negative statements about democracy. And 68% have agreed with the statement that democracy, despite its shortcomings, is better than other systems. We also see that the majority of respondents believe that democracy is more suitable for their countries than other systems of governance. But despite the significant support for democracy, when we ask respondents if, for example, they would accept the rise to power of a political party with whom they disagree through the ballot box, the answers change here a little bit. So only 50% of respondents said they would, compared to 41% who said that they would not accept that. Respondents also rated the level of democracy in the region at 6.2 out of 10. That is, democracy remains, as far as they're concerned, only halfway achieved. But it's important to note, again, that this was higher than the percentage recorded in the 2022 survey. Respondents also their perceived ability to criticize their governments appears limited, with an aggregate level of 5.3 out of 10. Now we look at political and civic participation. And we see here we see that although Arab citizens support the democratic system based on a substantive understanding of what democracy is, their civic and political participation remains limited. To clarify this point, we actually tested several indicators to measure the degree of political involvement. So for example, the extent of citizens' interest in political affairs in their countries, the extent of citizens' confidence in political parties, citizens' intention to participate in the next elections, etc. And we find, for example, so one of the indicators is citizens' interest, and we find that it is divided over the political affairs of their countries. So there has been an increase in the rates of interest in politics by 7%, whereas the proportion of those reporting that they are completely uninterested dropped by 6% relative to the previous survey in 2022. We also see that the percentage of respondents intending to vote has mostly declined since 2011, when 61% reported an intention to vote, to just 45% in this edition of the survey. And of course, other indicators like I mentioned, but basically we see that there is a significant lack of political participation despite this significant support for democracy. Now I turn to the questions that were developed for specific countries in our survey, and this is really in keeping with our established tradition. We continue to develop questions that are tailored to current affairs, and in this context, we did allocate special questions to countries that were undergoing transitions or facing crises and conflicts. And the first one is about Palestinians in Gaza, and the findings I present here really show the dire humanitarian situation faced by residents of the Gaza Strip during the war, as revealed by the respondents to the field survey that we conducted in March 2025. So we find here that 93% of respondents reported being displaced from their homes once or more during the war. 48% of respondents indicated that they were living in a house, so either intact or damaged, while 24% said that they were living in tents. 60 to 66% of respondents stated that they had mattresses, blankets, soap, water for bathing, but electricity, internet access, and medicine were available to only 11 to 36% of respondents, meaning 64 to 89% of respondents lacked those essential services. We also find that 90% of respondents indicated that they had needed medicine or medical supplies for themselves or a family member during the war, but had not been able to find them. 85% reported that they or a family member had experienced hunger multiple times during the war, while 81% said that they or a family member had been unable to find drinking water on several occasions. 46 to 57% of respondents indicated that they had witnessed multiple instances of people begging for food or water. We also included a set of questions for Lebanese respondents about their situation during the Israeli war and ongoing aggression against Lebanon. The survey was conducted in February 2025, and we find that 10% of respondents in Lebanon reported that a family member had left Lebanon as a result of war. 76% of respondents from areas targeted by Israel stated that they had been forced to flee during the conflict. 70 to 73% of respondents stated that they had internet, potable water, and water for bathing, but basic food supplies, healthcare, and medicine were available to only 41 to 47% of respondents. Now I move to Sudanese respondents' experiences of the ongoing armed conflict in Sudan, and the survey was conducted inside Sudan in November 2024. We see that 47% of respondents reported being displaced either individually or with some of or all of their families since the outbreak of the conflict. 34% of those displaced indicated that they had been able to return to their homes, while 66% reported not having returned as of the time of the survey. And regarding the availability of certain services, again, 58% of respondents indicated that potable water was available, while 45% indicated a lack of access to electricity, and 58% a lack of access to food supplies. 71% reported they were unable to obtain necessary medications, while 72% indicated they did not have access to healthcare when needed. And of course, we have many different questions that we asked in all of these countries, but these are just some figures and some numbers that I'm showing today. Now, look at Syrian public opinion. So again, like I said, this edition of the Arab Opinion Index included the first of its kind public opinion poll in Syria, which was conducted from July 25 to August 17, 2025. Following the fall of the Assad regime and covering a wide range of different variables. So these are some of the selected findings. We see that between 53% and 61% of Syrian respondents expressed positive feelings of hope, joy, happiness, security, and relief at the fall of the regime, while a lower percentage of no more than 22% expressed negative feelings like anxiety or uncertainty. And regarding general conditions in their country, Syrians reported that the most pressing problems facing their country are related to the economic situation, security, political stability, and national unity. Also, public opinion regarding a range of basic services in Syria was largely negative. So 54% of respondents rated the availability of food as good, while less than a third said the same about the availability of healthcare, internet, water, and electricity. 70% of respondents reported that sectarian discourse is widespread or somewhat prevalent in the country. 84% believe that people in Syria today categorize themselves and others based on sect and religion, while 66% believe that discrimination between people based on their sects and religions is widespread in the country. And 41% believe that tension between citizens based on sect or religion is the result of foreign interference, while 36% believe it's a result of an absence of citizenship and tolerance. Finally, 70% of respondents oppose an agreement with Israel that does not include the return of the Syrian Golan Heights, and 74% believe that Israel is working to support certain groups in Syria, in Syrian society, in order to fuel separatist conflicts and threaten the unity of Syrian territory. Meanwhile, 88% believe that Israel is working to threaten security and stability in Syria. So now I turn to the Palestinian cause and the war on Gaza. We see here that a large majority of the Arab public, 80%, believe that the Palestinian cause is a collective Arab cause, while just 12% believe it's solely a Palestinian cause. We also find that an overwhelming majority of 87% oppose recognition of Israel, while only 6% said that they would accept it. And of those who supported their countries recognizing Israel, half made such a move conditional on the formation of an independent Palestinian state. So despite the recent normalization agreements with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, the percentage of those who supported a recognition of Israel dropped by 2 percentage points in the 2025 Arab Opinion Index compared to the 2022 survey. And maybe I also don't want to spend too much time on it because I know that Dr. Yusuf will focus on this section. But the results of the survey also show significant changes in the opinions of some of the surveyed countries, most notably Sudan, where the percentage of those supporting recognition of Israel dropped to 7% after fluctuating between 13 and 23% in the surveys between 2022-2023 and 2012 and 13 and 2022-2023. It's important to note also that those who oppose recognizing Israel cited various factors, mainly linked to its colonial, racist, expansionist nature, its continued occupation of Palestinian territory, and cultural or religious explanations were largely absent. The reasons cited by respondents clearly indicated that their position on recognizing Israel is not likely to change as long as its colonial nature persists. Here we see also that respondents saw Israel's war on Gaza and Lebanon as something that directly affected them, 87% reporting that they felt psychological stress as a result. And when asked in an open-ended question about which country in the world had taken the best stance toward Palestinians during the war, 15% of respondents chose South Africa, followed by Spain and Iran, each with 7%. 83% of respondents also saw the recognition of Palestine by Latin American and European countries as a positive development. Regarding US policy towards Palestine, a majority of respondents viewed it negatively compared to only 11% who viewed it positively. Okay, so I have 2 more sections. Do I have some time? 5 minutes, okay. So here we're focusing, or these questions focus also on perceptions or Arab perceptions of which countries pose the greatest threat to Arab security. And we see here that Arab public opinion largely agrees that Israel and the United States pose the greatest threat. Iran comes in 3rd place with 6%. Respondents were also asked about the extent to which these policies of certain powers threaten the region's security and stability, and the results again show near unanimous public opinion, with 84% agreeing that Israeli policies threaten the security and stability of the Arab region, 77% agreed that US policies threaten the region's security and stability. So this clearly demonstrates that public opinion views Israeli and American policies as two of the greatest, or the two greatest threats to the region. Finally, I want to focus a little bit on public opinion on the United States. And again, I know Dr. Khalil will focus on this, so I'm just going to show some numbers. But this year, the Arab Opinion Index included a set of questions to understand public opinion trends towards the United States in general and the extent of cultural ties with it. And actually, the index had previously measured this 10 years ago, and found that there was a significant rejection of US foreign policy, but not of US culture or American society. So 73% of respondents agreed that they had some degrees of knowledge about the US, while 8% said that they were well acquainted with it. 24% indicated that their primary source of information about the US was traditional media, while 21% reported that their sources were the internet and search engines, especially social media. So comparing these results of the 2025 survey with those recorded 10 years prior reveals this qualitative shift in the sources of knowledge about American culture and society. So the internet and social media have really become this primary or sources of information about the US alongside traditional media. When respondents were asked about their feelings toward the US in general, 56% expressed negative feelings, a higher percentage than 10 years ago. 54% said their negative view of the US was the result of its foreign policy and not a disagreement with American values or culture, compared to 24% who said their negative view was a result of disagreement with American values and culture. We also explored attitudes toward the US using different variables, different questions. Here, for example, we asked them about other questions that are not related to political factors. So we asked them, for example, if they would choose the US or another country for specific personal reasons, like medical treatment for themselves, or a family member, professional training, university studies, working abroad, etc. Right? And we see the difference in how they respond in 2025 versus 10 years prior. So the results really show that public opinion has become more negative concerning American society. Respondents were more negative than previously when asked about a range of positive statements, such as American society's tolerance, respect for minorities, democratic nature, advanced arts, appreciation of individual efforts, etc. We have a list of questions that we ask about also how they view the US within our given different attributes. Finally, 44% of respondents agreed that a change in US policies toward Palestine, such as protecting Palestinians from Israel, halting financial and military support to the latter, would improve the view of the US. So I think I'll stop here to be able to give the discussants time to reflect on the findings, but thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Leila, for this great presentation and very important numbers and data on Arab public opinion. These findings show important themes, but I would like to highlight maybe three main trends that we continue to see every year through the Arab Opinion Index. The first one has to do with democracy. In a context of years, even decades of repression, conflict, economic decline, and widespread disillusionment, support for democratic principles among the Arab publics remains very strong across the Arab countries. Many respondents continue to express a desire for accountable government, rule of law, political participation, among others. So, in other words, dissatisfaction with the outcomes has not translated into the rejection of democratic ideals across the Arab world. The second trend that we continue to see year after year is regarding Palestine. The findings show that Palestine remains a central political and moral issue for the Arab world. Priorities may vary, as we saw in the data. Domestic concerns such as economy or corruption often rank high, but Palestine continues to shape perceptions of the regional order, of international justice, and of Western credibility, especially that of the United States. So attempts to sideline the Palestinian cause through normalization agreements, for example, are sharply at odds with Arab public opinion. And the third trend that I want to highlight has to do with views of the United States. One of the most important aspects of the data that we've been seeing for the last 10 years at least is the distinction many respondents draw between US foreign policy and the American people and US values and culture. American people are often viewed more favorably. US foreign policy in particular frequently generates negative and very strong negative views, especially if we consider policies regarding Israel, military interventions, and support for authoritarian regimes. And looking at the current moment, the Trump administration has intensified these dynamics. So what do these trends and the data mean for US policy? And what are their implications for the Trump administration's approach to the region? Also, what are the implications for the political dynamics taking shape and realignments in the region today, and for Arab leaders dealing with the Trump administration? To answer some of these questions, I will now turn it over to my colleagues, Youssef and Khalil. I would like to invite Youssef first, who will discuss these findings in relation to US policy towards Palestine.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Leah, thank you so much for that. And I will be speaking about Palestine in these numbers, but first, just a little bit of context to help us understand or perhaps situate these numbers so that we can better assess what we can take from them. And I just want to begin first by congratulating you and your colleagues on what has really been an amazing undertaking in the Arab Opinion Index. And we've continued to see the number of respondents grow over time. So this is really quite a remarkable feat. There isn't something comparable to this in terms of scale and scope when it comes to understanding Arab public opinion. And this is sort of where I want to start in helping us understand what the numbers we see here related to Palestine actually mean. When we think about public opinion polls, they don't normally look like this. And I think it's important to focus a little bit on the uniqueness of this particular type of poll to help us appreciate the Palestine dimension of this. If we think about polling, for example, about American public opinion, which is something we think about a lot here in the United States when we're talking about American attitudes towards this or that other domestic issue or this or that other international issue, we are talking about a set of respondents who all share a common national identity in the framework of a single country. That's not this. When we talk about global public opinion, and there are often polling efforts aimed at ascertaining global public opinion towards a wide range of issues. Hey, what do people around the world think about the war that's taking place over here, or the price of goods in the market, or the leadership of this or that country, or the policies of the United Nations? We see information from respondents from a range of different countries. But that's also not this. What's unique about the Arab Opinion Index is that we are seeing information from respondents that is both transnational but also unified under a common national conception. This is something that I don't think exists in other places. And I provide this context because for those of us who are familiar with the Arab world, that idea that we call the Arab world, and I see many faces around the room here who are very familiar with this part of the world and who have traveled through it. You know that there is tremendous diversity in the Arab world. And one of the more fascinating things in this poll is actually the respondents here were asked. They were asked, how do you understand Arab nationhood among Arab peoples? And this is one of the places where there's some really interesting difference of opinion. About a third across most regions say that they are one nation with shared characteristics. Another third says they're one nation, but every people has its own characteristics. And then smaller chunks say they represent different nations and people tied together with only tenuous links. And interestingly, the largest chunk of respondents who give that answer are in the Mashriq region. But I say this because it is one of the things that makes the responses around Palestine so outstanding in their nature, because of how wide a consensus there is. And that's what I think is truly remarkable. You have, across this region, different dialects spoken, many different languages, a wide range of politics, a wide range of regimes, a wide range of localized conflicts between different states. But when it comes to the issue of Palestine, there's tremendous unison. And there are some differences. There are some nuanced differences, of course. But what really stands out about the Palestine numbers is how much there is a consensus around this position among a really diverse range of respondents. And so with that opening context, I want to focus on three different sort of areas that we can look at more closely when it comes to Palestine in these numbers. One is Palestine being understood as an Arab issue. The second is the perception of Israel as a threat, a unique threat. And the third is public opposition to the idea of normalization. And so we'll cover each of these separately. When it comes to Palestine as an Arab issue, first of all, the overwhelming majority of respondents agree that the Palestinian cause is not only a Palestinian issue, but it is an Arab issue. Where we see the most dissent around this, I think, is among Palestinian respondents themselves, which is only natural that they would view it through a Palestinian lens, but also the majority of Palestinians view the Palestinian cause as an Arab issue. This, again, cuts across national borders. It's also something that we see across different demographics, across different ages, across different political and ideological differences. This is, I think, important, particularly when it comes to the age demographics, because, you know, for people who have lived in that region for most of their life, they've seen tremendous transformation in the region as far as regional politics in Palestine goes. There was a period when the standard bearers of opposition to the West were the revolutionary republics. That period came and went, right? We've seen tremendous transformation, and yet, even though people remember those eras differently, remember those moments differently, have lived through different pieces of this history, regardless to your age, there's widespread consensus on Palestine being an Arab issue. That, to me, is something that speaks to the depth of this feeling across the respondents. So what do we understand from this? We understand that Palestine is taken as a shared national cause and also, I think, a political cause, and one that has both moral and symbolic connections to Arab identity. One thing that I think would be interesting here, and perhaps this is a suggestion, Leila, as you move forward with this, I mean, one of the things that we have really seen in a very pronounced way over the last few years is not just how Palestine is an issue that's bigger than Palestine, but also how it has global resonance beyond the Arab world as well, in a way that I think is unique in comparison to many other issues. I do wonder sometimes on this particular question, how much of the response to Palestine being an Arab issue is in part a proxy for respondents thinking about Palestine as something that requires a collective response. Not just as an Arab response, but something that requires a perhaps global or international response. And I think we see some hints towards that in some of the other responses around which countries were best in terms of their response to Gaza, with South Africa and so on. But that's something that's a little bit difficult to tease out unless you ask those questions, right? Unless you ask that question among the same respondents. So overall, it remains a stable opinion, even as government policies shift in relation to this question. The implications of this, of course, is that Arab governments continue to face a legitimacy gap if they ever marginalize the Palestinian issue. And Palestine continues to serve as a unifying reference point for Arab public sentiment, but it's also a benchmark against which regional leadership is judged. If you are bad on Palestine, it is immediately understood that you are not representing the people, right? And so obviously different regimes pay different costs for policies which are not in line with public opinion, but this is something that always has to be accounted for. Efforts to reframe Palestine as somehow secondary or less important than local issues end up being rejected by publics. So leaders have to walk very careful lines when it comes to Palestine. And there are tons of examples of that we can discuss. Moving on to the perception of Israel as a threat. Israel is ranked among the top of perceived threats to the security and stability of the Arab region. And this perception is stronger than that of many other regional or international actors. One of the things, and I wasn't quite sure if it came up on the slides because we couldn't see it, but it's in the bigger poll that's particularly interesting, is sort of how these numbers have changed over time. Right? And Israel has always been perceived as a significant threat within the Arab region. The history, of course, has a lot to do with it. But over the course of this poll, right, from 2011 through today, one of the major shifts that we've seen in terms of responses to this question, specifically as it relates to regional actors or global actors' policies that are threatening to the Arab region, is the way in which Iran is perceived. And we have seen a significant decline over this period of time, quite a direct downward longitudinal trend in the numbers of those that say that Iranian policies are a major threat. Now, how you view Iranian policies is probably different if you're sitting in Casablanca or if you're sitting in Beirut, but these are broad regional trends that we see over time. And this, of course, is in part a response to the last several years and what we've seen throughout the region. These numbers are collected from November of 2024 through 2025. So this, of course, captures the period after Israel's major attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon, all the way through the period of American bombing of Iranian sites in June of 2025. And so I think you will continue to see this trend over time, right, in these numbers. So what this tells us is that while perception of Israel as a threat continues to be very, very high, perception of Iran as a threat is something that continues to go down, right? And one of the things that we have sort of heard often discussed, particularly as it relates to the impetus for normalization agreements, which we will move on to next, is that this is a product of sort of the threat environment in the region. That Arabs being threatened by Iran will somehow then move towards normalization with Israel for their collective security. But what we are seeing actually is that over time, even as Iran has become is perceived less of a threat by people in the region, this has not changed the reality in terms of opinion towards Palestine or the perception of Israel as a threat. And what has been consistent throughout this time is that the Arab publics are opposed to normalization, and by and large, Arab regimes have not moved in that direction, despite the many different incentives that have been given for them to do so. Of course, the perception of Israel as a threat is something that is shaped by the military reality on the ground, but also Israel's ongoing occupation and colonization of Palestine, the genocide in Gaza, and importantly, Israel's continued and expanding military operations beyond Palestine as well, something that is a very important dynamic in the last couple of years. So moving towards normalization, we see strong opposition to normalization with Israel. This is not new. This is something that is confirmed year over year. There's not a whole lot of variation. There is a little bit of variation at the margins, but there's overwhelming opposition. You know, what we can take from this, obviously it means that states who would move in the direction of normalization would be doing so very prematurely as far as their publics are concerned, who believe, and other numbers in the poll confirm this, that the reason that they oppose normalization is specifically because of Israel's treatment of Palestinians, its actions as a settler colonial entity towards Palestinians, and absent a resolution to that issue, normalization is not something that the publics would consider. And so, you know, this obviously leads to deep popular resistance to normalization agreements, as well as long-term challenges towards the sustainability of agreements that have been signed, and you know, questions about stability for any governments that continue to entertain this possibility down the road. So governments are not able to rely on public buy-in when it comes to such steps, and they will ultimately have to depend, if they decide to move in this direction, more heavily on political repression and external support for such policies, which themselves will lead to greater instability. Finally, in conclusion, I will say that these three themes, Palestine remains central to Arab political consciousness. Israel continues to be widely perceived as a threat and not a partner. This is something that has, I think, only been escalated in recent years. And finally, normalization lacks popular legitimacy, not just because of the lack of support for it among Arab public opinion, but also because the threat perception in the region has changed significantly over the last several years, and that's perhaps one of the most important developments since the genocide in Gaza began. The gap between Arab public opinion and Arab state policies on Palestine sometimes remains very wide and persistent, but any regional order, we know that sidelines Palestine risks political fragility and public contestation. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Youssef, for highlighting these trends and explaining their implications. Now, I would like to invite Khalil Jahshan, Executive Director of Arab Center, Washington, D.C., who will comment on Arab perceptions of democracy and attitudes towards the United States.
Thank you, Tamara, Layla, and Youssef for great presentations. There is an advantage and disadvantage for being the fourth person in a panel. The disadvantages are basically, I feel like Elizabeth Taylor's husband number 8. I don't know what added value I could bring to this relationship, but I'll do my best. What is the significance of all these results to U.S. policymakers, particularly at this time, when U.S. policy is not viewed in a friendly frame of mind throughout the region, and yet it seems to be bent on focusing on continuing its projects in the region without asking what do people in the region think. Frankly, with the emphasis on peace that the administration has chosen, I'm reminded of yesterday's statement by a White House official basically saying that the president is totally focused, or because of his total focus on peace in the Middle East, that he is opposed to Sunday's Israeli Security Cabinet decision led by Netanyahu to de facto annex the West Bank. With all due respect to the White House and to the president, you could definitely wage war in consultation with other leaders. But I'm not sure you could wage peace in consultation just with leaders. Peace, after all, is people to people. If people are not involved, if these views are not considered and accommodated by policymakers in Washington, frankly, we're wasting our time. It's not going to produce the intended results. Now, I see in this room a lot of experienced Washington hands and analysts and academics and what have you. We are all aware that successive US administrations have historically regarded the Arab world as a strategic, vital region to US national interest, both in the Middle East itself or the MENA region and beyond. So today, when we look at US policy, more than 1/3 of the 22 member states or countries of the League of Arab States are viewed by Washington as key security partners and allies of the United States. You don't have to name them all, but Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Morocco, etc. These, of course, countries, some of them, at least six of them, are classified as major non-NATO allies. In addition, you have countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates that are considered key security partners for the United States in its ambitious policies throughout the region. Indeed, as we speak right now, there is a significant US military presence in the region, estimated still at 40 to 50 military personnel across 19 major locations throughout the Arab world. Some people think using very conservative statistics because the numbers are probably double that, considering the military movements or moves that have been increased over the past few weeks. Aside from the military, trade, for an administration that's so obsessed with business and making deals and trade, the 2024 statistics show that we have a trade total with this region, with the Arab region, reaching about $140 to $150 billion. Out of that, which is rare compared to other regions around the world, there is a trade surplus of about $20 billion in that. So you would assume that somehow, particularly when you take into consideration the obsession of this president 2-3 blocks away from this building, obsession with how convincing he has been in convincing Arab leaders to invest in the United States. People talk about, at least the White House keeps repeating, $3 trillion so far. The president says $5 trillion, $6 trillion. The Institute for International Economics reported last week that the number exceeds $5 trillion so far. Some people say actually the numbers are probably even double that, especially if you start counting investments in private companies owned by the Trump family and investments in the American economy formally. But anyway, given this degree of extensive both security and economic partnerships that I just mentioned, you would assume that somehow the foreign policy elite in this town would pay a little bit more attention to Arab public opinion rather than just basically dealing with officialdom. As an old hand in Washington with 43 to be precise, years of experience in dealing with people at the White House and the State Department and other agencies, I would describe Washington's consideration or interest in Arab public opinion over the years as haphazard, superficial, and disconnected from reality, and still remains so today. Despite the strong relevance of Arab public opinion to securing, allegedly, the US national interest and objectives that we publicly seek to realize in the region. Now, is Arab public opinion really that important to US policies, and what are the implications of the Arab Opinion Index to those who formulate and implement this policy? I would like to refer, I'm not using slides, but you have right in front of you the executive summary document. If you look at page 1 of the document, you will see the 9 areas that were highlighted earlier as the focus, thematic focus of this whole public opinion effort. And you would think that American policy, based on what I just said in my introductory remarks, would be interested in looking at the living conditions of citizens in the Arab world, would be interested in local Arab perceptions of state institutions, would be interested in Arab public opinion or views of democracy, would be interested in Arab views of civic and political participation. You know, as a country that claims to be the leader of the democratic world, where is the interest in these issues? And aside from just interest in some of the conflicts that were mentioned, whether it's Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan, Syria, and so on, there is absolutely, like I said, no serious, steady interest in public opinion. It seems to me that decision makers in Washington, on a bipartisan basis, for decades and decades, have preferred to essentially deal with subservient executives in the Arab world, president to president, because it's a lot easier. And it's a cop-out, ignoring, as I said, public opinion and looking at these results that we presented to you today. Now, since 2011, Arab Opinion Index has emphasized, if anything at all, the importance, first of all, the existence of an Arab opinion, because there are so many people in town here that deny there is no such thing, because there is no democracy. There is, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. Frankly, this evidence since 2011 shows that there is a public opinion. It is steady, it's measurable, it is important, and it has to be taken into consideration. Yes, Arab public opinion, like other public opinion, including American public opinion. As a matter of fact, if you look at, if we are to conduct a public opinion in this town about sunrise and sunset, it'll probably split us Americans into at least 50-50, 50 for this one, 50 against, whether sunset is in the east or the west. So it is not surprising that 46% to 41% in Arab society only slightly in favor of democracy. There are some people who do not favor democracy. But if you look at page 8 in your executive summary, look at figure 9. It shows that 64% disagree with the notion that the democratic system is incompatible with Islam and Arabs. All right, that's the most common excuse you hear from officialdom in this town, that it is not compatible. Still, it is being repeated by this administration all the time, specifically with regards to Islam and Islamic culture, that it is incompatible. And yet the numbers tell a totally different story. 49% disagree with the view that democracies are characterized as indecisive and create discord. 56% disagree with the statement that democratic systems are not good for maintaining public order, therefore it's better to have military rule. And they always accuse Arab societies of leaning in that direction when actually events and numbers show the opposite. If you look at figure 11 on page 9, again, 67% support democracy in their own country. They're not talking theoretically, like let's have democracy in the Arab world. No, I want democracy in my country specifically. So that is very significant. I'm not sure we can get 67% in the United States right now. I'm really not sure. I would like to test it, but I'm not sure we can get it at this time. So the numbers tell a totally different story from the myth, the mythical kind of perception that prevails in Washington. Second point I'd like to make is Arab public opinion with regards to the United States. How do Arabs feel about the United States? You know, a question that it drives me nuts, and I've been hearing it, you know, after 45 years, as I said, of being involved in kind of pro-Arab work in the United States, Arab American organizations, and so on. The question, why do they hate us? Every time there is something goes wrong with US policy and there is turmoil in the Arab world, they blame it on this question, you know, why do they hate us? And as if like the 450 to 500 million Arabs throughout the Arab region somehow with a, you know, push of a button, somehow they all kind of unite and decide they want to hate America. And the answer most usually given, including by academics, by the way, who analyze the Arab world, they always say, well, you know, they don't know us. Well, frankly, do we know them? I mean, look at the percentage of Arabs who have knowledge of the United States and look at the percentage of Americans who have knowledge of the Arab world. There is no comparison whatsoever. So the findings of our poll basically show a relatively significant interest in the Arab world and knowledge of the United States and its close ties with key Arab countries. Figure 41, particularly on page 27 of your executive summaries, if you want to look at it now or later, basically make that very clear. Indeed, 73% of respondents agreed that they have some knowledge of the United States. And as Layla said, with 21%, which is a new kind of a growing number, attributing their knowledge, particularly young people, who are the majority in the Arab world, by the way, attributing their knowledge to the internet and to social media. So I mean, this is both a challenge and an opportunity for US policymakers in terms of how to interact and how to deal with this new generation and where it is getting its information from. Still, the number is slightly higher, 24% still get their information basically from the traditional media sources, but it is changing very quickly. It is true when asked to characterize their feelings toward the United States, 56% of the respondents basically express negative feelings about the United States. So we're not denying that. And it is more, as I think Layla mentioned, it's 6% more than last year, last survey in 2014. But when you ask him specifics, when you start pinning him down, as you can see on page 28, particularly figure 42, they seem to distinguish between attitude toward the United States in general and attitude toward US foreign policy. In other words, the resentment is not hatred for America. They hate us. No. Basically, they hate our foreign policy. They are responding to our foreign policy. And when you look at details, it seems to me you could come up, I was joking earlier before we started that I have a theory to advance here, that it seems to me that the attitude, the negative Arabs in the Arab region toward the United States seem to be directly proportional to the intensity of the conflict that they are undergoing, and particularly US role in that conflict. So the more we're involved and the more negative our involvement is, the more resentment you are getting from the region. So if again, I refer you to figure number 46 toward the end of the executive summary. We ask, why is it? I mean, why are you resentful and we give people, the surveyed population, we gave them 8 or 9 choices to choose from. And look at the numbers. 66% of those surveyed said the US seeks to dominate Arab countries. 62% said the US seeks to impose its policies on the rest of the Arab world. 63% says US exploits its foreign aid to impose its own agenda. We've made progress in that. We cut foreign aid, so they don't have to worry about that now. There is no USAID, so. 58% US policies contribute to increasing terrorism in the region. So there are reasons, there is a logic for that. It's not like, again, emotional hatred or resentment or animosity. Can the US help its own image in the region? I said earlier, you know, there are challenges, but there are opportunities. There is a silver lining in these results. We actually asked in the survey about that. And there are some specifics. If you look at, you know, again, figure 47 on the same page, stopping material and military support for Israel, the largest group in the respondents, 17% said that would help. Protecting Palestinians from Israel, in other words, intervening in a positive way. In Gaza, of course, with the genocide of the past 2 years plus, in the West Bank, with the de facto annexation that just is taking shape openly, and with the Prime Minister coming tomorrow to probably advocate that at the White House and probably convince the President in spite of his opposition to it. I don't know if you placed your bet on what the results are going to be tomorrow. I did. And I'm not sure who will convince whom tomorrow. We'll see. Bringing about a just resolution to the Palestine question, as Yusuf and earlier Layla mentioned. And finally, the next number in line was basically treating the Arab people with dignity and respect, which has been missing for too many years, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to rectify that. Thank you for your attention. Tamara.
Thank you, Khalil, for these important insights. We have a few questions coming in from the online audience. I would like to remind everybody that you can send in your questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom or by email to events@arabcenterdc.org. For those of you here at the National Press Club, please use the question cards in front of you, and when you're ready, please raise your card and it will be collected and brought to me. Thank you. I'll start with a general question for Layla. This question references the fact that many attitudes have remained consistent over the years, and this question is about what attitudes have shifted more significantly in the Arab Opinion Index over the past few years.
Should I answer now?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, thanks. This is a great question. I think, like you said, and like we presented, a lot of the attitudes actually we've seen how they've remained steady over the years. Some have shifted. For example, one I can think about, and that Dr. Khalil mentioned towards the end, is related to how people get their sources, where they get their sources from, the use of social media, for example. Like, this is a big shift that we see in our data. So people resort more to following the news, for example, on social media, on the internet, search engines, rather than looking at traditional media sources on TV, etc. And I think this has implications and could be studied more extensively to see how people use these new platforms to get their sources, but also how it impacts their interest in political affairs in general, or how it relates to their interest in political affairs in general. So this is something that I have in mind now. Yeah, I'll try to remember others, not from my presentation, from the general data.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. A question for Khalil. A general question about U.S. policymaking. Why do U.S. officials ignore Arab public opinion when crafting U.S. Middle East policy? Are they confident that Arab autocratic governments will persist regardless?
I think I alluded to the answer. It's a lot easier, but it has something a more serious side to it. First of all, I find U.S. foreign policy making a short-term premise rather than a long-term institutionalized. Unlike Europe, for example, where you have basically a long-term nature or character to foreign policy, even when parties change power in terms of the identity of the prime minister here and there. There is a sense of continuity. So when you analyze, let's say, British policy in the Middle East, negative or positive, you see a continuity. You don't see that in U.S. foreign policy that much. So it is whim, and it's becoming particularly a whim right now. It has never happened that bad before. It just changes by the minute. It changes via tweet or social media, something. I don't know what it's called these days. But it's hard for a superpower to conduct business and to have extensive national interest in a strategic region like the Middle East with 22 different entities. And like I said, 10 of them close allies. With extensive trade, with extensive, let's say, security relationships. And when you take into consideration how they view the Arab-Israeli conflict and the Palestine question and the centrality of that to them, I tell you, it is easier and to deal with subservient authoritarian rulers in the Arab world. It's easier. You can shame him, you can pressure him, you can tie arms sales to what you want him to do. But like I said before, on security issues, that's easy to do. On peace issues, it's not, because peace requires the people. They have to be, look at the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. Is there peace between the people? You tell me. I don't think so. I have family in Jordan. I have family in Gaza. I have friends and family in Egypt. They don't see themselves as having peace with Israel on the public level, on the personal, individual level. And if we are to have really serious peace, by a president who claims he's working on his 8th conflict resolution in the world and using the Middle East as a case in point, well, I mean, if he's serious, he needs to really play ball with the right party, the people. He needs to address the people. He needs to take that into consideration. And by the way, as a longtime observer of Arab politics, particularly U.S.-Arab relations, over the years, I've met with 48 Arab leaders, including heads of states, foreign ministers, prime ministers, on dealing with this. My specialty, or at least the reason they met with me, is can you help us improve relations with Washington? Okay? And relations cannot continue to be based on the same anymore. And I know increasingly Arab leaders, including authoritarian ones that are not necessarily on my good list of leaders, keep raising this issue with the administration, this administration, just over the past few months. And they're not getting a positive response. I don't think the president knows what they're talking about. They feel the pressure from below. He hinted at it a couple of times, rushing usually on the plane, hey, next to the bathroom. Yeah, they told me they, but that, again, this is not superpower politics the way it should be done with serious consideration. I mean, you basically make normalization with Israel and peace in the Middle East as your #1 priority in your Middle East foreign policy. And it doesn't reflect, it doesn't jibe. You can't do it as one man on social media. I mean, I've seen peace processes in this town. There's a whole cemetery of peace processes, bigger than the National Cemetery, by the way. We've had a lot of peace processes over the years. Why did they fail? All right, nobody asks that in town. There are some common ingredients lessons that we can learn from, but we are intent on repeating the same mistakes again and again and again, and one of them is ignoring the public. So even when you get Arab leaders that come to town, and every time they do, you see a hint, hey, I have my public opinion, I need to protect my own, you know what, but they don't take that seriously.
Thank you, Khalil. We have a lot of questions about normalization. So I'll give this to Yusuf. First, how do you explain the differences between the countries regarding views about normalization with Israel? And how do you explain the fact that so many Saudi respondents declined to answer this question? And I will add another question here. How do you support the claim that the Arab public is in support of Palestine when countries like Bahrain and the UAE were not polled, and these are the main normalizers? And maybe we can give this question to Leila as well later.
Yeah, I think on the specifics of the poll, I will certainly defer to you, Leila, and perhaps on the Saudi non-responses as well. I mean, I think we could venture a guess there. I think it would be useful, too, for the audience to hear from you, Leila, about some of the challenges of doing public opinion polling in the many different countries in which this takes place. Just two things really quick. First, on the question that you asked, Khalil, why don't American foreign policymakers take Arab public opinion into account? The first thing that came into my mind is, why don't they take American public opinion into account? Foreign policy is not something which public opinion plays a very, very significant role in determining often, but particularly with this administration, which has, dispensed entirely away with the idea of, and we see it in the national security strategy which they've published, the idea of democracy, which previous American administrations have at least saw the value of pretending it matters in terms of pursuing their foreign policy. This administration dispenses with that entirely. This administration wants to make business transactions. And when you are making business transactions, you want to sit across from one person who can tell you what it is that they can offer, what it is that they can do, and what the bottom line is. They don't want to deal with people who have to go back and check with their publics. They don't want to have to deal with people who have to survive the next election. This complicates business. And that's why this administration is having the easiest time dealing with authoritarians and the hardest time dealing with what have traditionally been democratic partners of the United States. Because this administration looks at relationships as transactional deal making. And if you are worried about public opinion, you're wasting this president's time. This is how I think they see this largely. On the question of normalization, how do you explain the variation? In terms of public opinion, I mean, there isn't a tremendous amount of variation on this issue within the numbers. Most are very significantly opposed. Some are overwhelmingly opposed, and some are just significantly opposed. There's probably reasons for that in different country contexts. We're talking about, again, very unique places. There could be subsections of the population that have different perspectives on this in certain places. Other places where the population is far more homogeneous. and probably each one has its own sort of reasons for that. I think we talked about some variation in Sudan, for example. Obviously, in Syria, we're seeing that. That's probably a very recent dynamic driven by the change in the last couple of years in government. Obviously in Saudi Arabia, the biggest issue is the, do not respond or did not respond or so on. Perhaps there, I'll turn it over to you, Leila, for more.
Yeah. Maybe I'll add another question for you, Leila, here about the methodology. We have a question about how the data was collected. How do you ensure a fair representation of populations? And are the responses proportional to population size? Why conduct face-to-face surveys instead of online? And you can answer the question about normalization as well.
Yes, sure. So these are all great questions. So maybe I'll start with your last question then. So we do conduct or ensure that it is probability proportional to size sampling. So we do ensure that every person has a chance of being represented. Let's say, for example, a country has 30% or 50% rural area, then 50% of it will be in our sample size as well for that particular country. So so all of these, we have to include also, or we have to ensure gender balance. We have to ensure that all of these, age groups are represented, gender is represented fairly into the sample, provinces, etc. The other question that was mentioned or was asked about, well, there are challenges also to conducting surveys in many countries, right? And this is why sometimes we resort to phone interviews. So in Saudi Arabia, we resort to phone interviews. This year in Tunisia, we also resorted to phone interviews because of the current conditions in the countries, because it is, we have to also ensure the safety of our respondents, the safety of our field workers as well. Sometimes the local or our local partners who do the field work, are not able to do the field work in person, so we have to resort to phone interviews. And I think this is why also this explains the very high percentage of no answers in Saudi Arabia. So we try to deal with that in different ways. So, we do know that we recognize that some questions are very sensitive, that some people don't want to answer certain questions sometimes. So we do find ways to ask the same question in different ways. So we always have reiterations of the same question. We ask them in very different ways. We ask them many times. We do like experimental ways of asking the questions to try to get at some of the answers. And sometimes we take the no answer as an answer, right? This is in and of itself an answer to the question. It really depends on how you analyze. It really it requires the researcher or the person who's using the data to analyze also what these numbers mean, not just take it as it is. I think I answered most of the questions.
Another quick question for you about the polling of Palestinians in Gaza, where they asked about their views for the future of Gaza and what kind of government they want to see. Maybe that's important for the future as well.
Yes, we do ask a lot of these questions. I did also want to emphasize that this data, all of the data is available online on our website. So you can download the data, you can play with it. We also have an interactive portal on our website that you can use to play around with the data, look at the demographic variables, look at all the questions that we ask. So all of these questions are there. Unfortunately, I couldn't present all of them today. But yes, we ask so many different questions to people in Gaza in the survey that we did. Yeah.
Thank you, Leila. We have a couple of questions about immigration, and this is, the hot topic in the United States today, and anti-immigration sentiments or anti-immigrant sentiments. Among the Arab public, we see that despite conflict, repression, corruption, and economic security, the majority, 72%, do not want to immigrate or do not wish to immigrate. How do you explain that? And there's a question from an audience member about what can Western governments do to address the root causes of immigration or migration from the Arab world. So they do not wish to immigrate, but many of them have to. So how would you explain the fact that they do not wish to immigrate despite the conditions, and what can the U.S. do to mitigate? Yusuf, do you want to address that?
Sure. I mean, who wants to leave their home? Very few people do. I think nobody wants to be in that situation and only considers that as a last resort if conditions get to the point where it requires that. So I think that's part of it. I think that's the natural response that you'd get from most people around the world who are tied to their home countries, that they don't want to leave. I think in addition to that, we are living in a moment where much of the Arab world and the Muslim world and other parts of the global South have witnessed the way that the West has treated migrants in Europe, in the United States, and that doesn't exactly encourage you to leave either, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it in terms of what the United States can do. I mean, first and foremost, stop policies that foment conflict and destruction in these countries. People are a lot less likely to leave their countries if they're not afflicted with war and conflict, much of which has been the product of U.S. policy in the region. So policies that promote security, stability, economic development are likely to keep people in their countries and happy to be there. I don't think there's a whole lot more to it than that.
Thank you, Youssef. We are running out of time, and we have way more questions than we can address, but I want to give the last question to Khalil. Well, maybe a couple of questions. One has to do with perceptions of U.S. policies as more dangerous than those of Russia and China in the Middle East, and how do you explain that? And maybe just a general question, how can Arab public opinion be used to shape U.S. policy towards MENA, and how should incorporating Arab publics into peace processes, how would that look like?
Siding with Israel, sponsoring and endorsing the genocidal war in Gaza, and so on. Despite all the steps being undertaken on the West Bank by the settlers and by even the IDF itself, the administration sees fit to send $6.5 billion more of arms to Israel without even congressional discussion or approval. So it's no wonder that people in the region see U.S. policy as basically undermining the stability and the security of their nations. So there is a logic for basically this, Israel is the most serious threat to us. The U.S. comes next by affiliation with Israel and because of support for Israel. And that's where U.S. policy gets in trouble, because we would like the Arabs to come under the rubric of whatever, the Stars and Stripes, and join us in attacking Iran. But they don't see Iran as much of a threat. Now, some countries, again, in proximity to Iran might feel different than others, not all of them, but there is a kind of, different perspectives, and you have to account for that. How do you factor in, look, international relations are relations between states, okay? So the bulk of decision-making is done in interacting between executives and governments and what have you. But at the same time, you take into consideration public opinion. I mean, when the White House deals with, let's say, the British government or the French government, we deal with the executives, of course. They are elected to represent their countries, and it's easier to do that. That's how diplomacy is conducted. But there is room for public diplomacy. There is room for taking the views of the public, because the last thing you want to do is corner your own ally, if you will, by creating a gap between the policy, the foreign policy of an ally, and the public sentiment of that ally. And we haven't been good at this. And I'm worried about the departure from even though it was lip service in the past to public opinion, now there is no even lip service. There is a total vacuum in this regard. And like I said before, that's not the way for a superpower to conduct its foreign policy, because its interests militate against it and require an alternative approach to that. It's not that you have to consult every Arab among the 500 million Arabs. It's impossible to do. You don't go and conduct public opinion surveys. But the way your embassies are geared to function, the way your embassies in the region deal with the public, the way they gather information, the way, we just heard recently some frank reports coming from certain embassies about public sentiments regarding recent U.S. steps that were thrown away by the ambassador that represents, because he's afraid that by the time the stuff gets to Washington, he's going to be fired. You can't do that. You can't do that.
Thank you, Khalil, and thanks to all my colleagues up here on stage for their presentations and valuable insights. Thanks to all of our audience members here at the National Press Club and watching online. Apologies to those whose questions we were not able to address. I just want to note that a copy of this report is available on our website at arabcenterdc.org. Thank you again, and we look forward to engaging with you in future events.